fun doesn't stop. Thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Jesse, can you start by talking a little bit about, you took a trip to Poland, that was some of the inspiration for this, so can you start by telling us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for being here, and it's a real, well, I guess, surprise to see people. So I mean, a lot of this movie is like kind of autobiographically accurate insofar as like that house where we filmed that ending scene where we put the rock down is my family's house from 1939 when they, were kicked out of the house, and it's based on my Aunt Doris, or we call her Grandma Dory in the movie, because why, I don't know. That's the extent of my imagination, is the changeable letter of her name. And my wife and I in 2008 took this trip, not with a tour group, but just ourselves backpacking through Poland to try to find this house before Google Maps and where internet we could find where everybody lived ever. And so we got to this house and we were standing outside of it, and I in particular was trying to feel some great cathartic emotional resolution, find answers in my life, and I didn't. I just felt like I'm standing outside of this house, and then suddenly I was loitering, and it was always just that weird feeling of expecting to have some great cathartic feeling and then not having it, and it stayed with me for a long time. And as I was writing this, I was just trying to capture some of that awkwardness of trying to explore something impactful, but the thing is not the impactful thing. It's actually the people you're traveling with is the kind of main emotional thrust of the trip.
Can you tell us a little bit about sort of how you as you were writing, how the sort of characters and the dynamic between David and Benji sort of came to you?
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. Yes, I've been writing plays for 20 years, and in my first play, followed a guy named David who snuck weed into Poland, and was staying with a second cousin. And then in another play I wrote called Spoils, I played a character named Ben who was kind of maladaptive, and thank you. So I was basically, I had written versions of these kinds of people, and then I thought it'd be great to put these two guys who don't exist in a room, and I was writing them going to Mongolia, and I was 30 pages into the script before they were going to Mongolia to meet another friend of theirs who was the most radical, most pure one, who Benji admired and David was jealous of, and then turns out the guy sold out to a Norwegian tourism company, and Benji was just crumbled, and they were staying on top of a mountain in Mongolia, and David then was crumbled because Benji was crumbled, but it also gave David a little more power because he was now friends with the corporate guy because he's corporate. Anyway, I was 30 pages into the script that wasn't really working, and as I was frustrated trying to write the script, an ad popped up on the internet for Auschwitz tours with lunch. And it literally was just an ad banner. It said Auschwitz tours, and then in parentheses, I guess out of respect, it said, or with lunch. And it was just it was a very weird gift to get, but it was a gift. And it was just it just occurred to me in that moment that that's the story, because you can do this great thing, which is kind of, make a bit of a commentary on yuppie tragedy tourism, which is odd in and of itself, but that's not, that would be just a shallow joke, which we kind of play with here, But you could also tell the story of people who are experiencing modern day kind of pain or grief or difficulties in their lives, but put them against the backdrop of something objectively so much worse. So when my character says I feel my pain is unexceptional, so I don't feel the need to burden everybody, like Benji, who burdens everybody with his emotional roller coaster and moods. And also talking about how is it the product of 1,000 miracles? How is this person how is it that us, who shouldn't even be alive today, who shouldn't be born, how are we us? How are we not both the president? How are we not NASA scientists? We're just regular people, and yet we survive by 1,000 miracles. And is that what 1,000 miracles produces? And so it allowed me to ask all these questions, and it allowed me to kind of retake that trip that I took with my wife so many years ago.
Well, because we've spoken before, so I know that you were writing while in COVID, and you didn't actually take a tour. So how did you figure out the map and the situation?
Oh yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it was very strange. So first of all, even if it wasn't during COVID, I don't think I could convince my wife that I'm just going to go to Poland on a lark because I had an idea for a movie. I've written a lot of things, but I think I'm still not I don't think anybody takes it seriously in the house. So but also it was like during COVID, so basically I was writing, so I clicked on the Auschwitz Tours with Lunch thing, and it took me to basically a tour, and so I was like, I got just like 10 PDFs of like different potential tours that people are really taking, and then I just basically Google Street Viewed the entire script. So, I don't know if you remember, there's this like little scene where Benji's buying water for everybody, and David's left out, and Benji decides to say gracias instead of the Polish thank you. It's just this guy doesn't anything he wants, but basically like that scene came about, not that it's like this great scene, but the only reason that scene is in there is because like on my Street View tour of Poland as I'm writing the script, like they went from one monument to that park, and in between the monument to the park was this little grocery store, and so I basically was just like street viewing the entire tour, and like picking up anything that seemed like it would be real, and it's just a much cheaper way to do that.
Can you tell us a little bit about casting Kieran and how, and when he sort of came to you as this idea that he would be Benji?
It was this very strange unconscious process because I had not seen Kieran in anything. I know he's in the most important show of our lives, but I just don't watch anything when it's popular because I'm jealous and angry. So I guess you know what it is. So anyway, maybe the two of us watch Succession in a few years, but when no one remembers it. But basically, so I didn't actually see him in anything, but we had an audition together, like in 2008, for this movie Adventureland. It was a movie I was already acting in. I was hired to play a role, and Kieran came in to audition for a character that was kind of like my friend who also like punched me in the balls and like tormented me. And I had done auditions all that whole day with other actors auditioning for the same role. But Kieran came in, actually hit me in the balls, and then grabbed my nipples basically and just squeezed them very tight until the director, who was unheard by Kieran, said, "Oh stop, oh stop." And he was so good in the audition. He was so funny and so alive and vibrant, and also so kind of like aggressive with me physically. And it just stayed with me. I guess in my unconscious. So when I was writing the movie, I had written the scene where he calls everybody up to that monument to take pictures, and I read the scene to my sister that night, and she said, there's only one person in the world who can play this part, it's Kieran. And I think it just clicked for me that, of course it's that guy, but I hadn't put together that it was because he abused me so many years prior. And then it occurred to me, there it is. And it's just like when he showed up to Poland after trying to drop out of the movie for 5 months, when he finally showed up late, he just was that person, and he was so brilliant. And it was just like, it's hard in casting, especially in a movie like this, because the movie is realism. It's not, we're not portraying we're not portraying eccentrics that don't exist in this world. We're portraying essentially unusual people who exist in this world. And so it requires somebody who you can really get inside the head of, that you can really kind of understand it's not arch, it's a real portrayal of a person. And yet the character is larger than life. And so it just requires somebody who has that essence, who also happens to be a genius actor. And to me, it's just like the most exhilarating experience to act across the room.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you thought the visual language of the film. Obviously, the scene in Madonna is very striking, but how you thought about how you wanted your camera to portray Poland.
Oh yeah, thanks. It was another Kieran problem actually, in that I had this amazing shot list and amazing plan with my cinematographer. He's one of the greatest cinematographers in Europe. His name is Michał Dimit. He's like a 30-year-old wonderkid who did this movie EO. I don't know if you saw it last year about the donkey. Brilliant. And so we had this like just amazing plan that we would do all these shots in like the lingo we'd be calling like wonders, basically, a shot that doesn't have to cut a million times in order to tell a story, but can actually take the actors through choreographed scenes and so make it just feel a little more, sophisticated, classical, traditional, etc. And then Kieran showed up to the set and wouldn't stand on my marks that we gave him. And he said, why would I do that? And I was like, oh, because behind you is this beautiful sunset. And he said, well, I don't think I would do that. So I said, well, what would you do? And so we rehearsed the scene, and he would not do that, and he would do something so much more interesting. Running around, where now, I had to chase him, and suddenly we're taking the camera off the dolly, off these beautiful shots, and now just like following him, like, a very American independent film, just like chasing him around to give it the illusion that, what movies sometimes do that I I wanted to avoid with this. But it was so much better than our plan because he was so brilliant. He was able to kind of, look the way he charms the group. It's just his energy. He just has this infectious energy and really thrives in spontaneous, with spontaneous circumstances.
Yeah. I want to ask you about Chopin and how you thought about scoring it.
I was writing this movie when I was editing my first movie, and we got, and I don't know if people know about music licensing here, but basically to license any song, even a song you hear in a deep background is like 10 grand or something, which is expensive on an independent movie. And so I was also using some Chopin in my first movie, and it was all free, because it's public domain because he's dead. And so who's going to sue me? And basically, and Chopin is from Poland. My wife and I visited the Chopin house in that trip in 2008. And so I just started playing the music as I was writing it, and then I realized, oh, this has to be the whole movie, and I have to put it in the script, otherwise I'm going to get pressure to change it, from financiers who want Jason Mraz. And so, anyway, he's fine, it's just I wanted, not the point. He basically, so anyway, so I was in the script, and basically it changed the nature of the writing too. It was like, oh, the scene should be longer because it's playing, or quicker because the staccato of the music makes the scene want to go quicker. And then I would play the songs for the actors or in the cinematographer's ear as he's on the dolly, so I could show the pace that we want to get. And so basically the music is exactly the cues that were in the script, and I just wanted it to feel like a more sophisticated aesthetic piece overall than the crassness of the two guys. Because the two guys have this kind of crass relationship, they curse, they're smoking weed, they're sneaking on roofs, but I wanted the movie as a kind of overall aesthetic piece to feel like it wasn't just with them and bro culture, it was actually kind of commenting on it in a way that felt with a kind of sophisticated remove. And so the music does that really well. It adds a tone to it that says the filmmaking is not the characters. That's the only way I could articulate it, is it just makes the movie feel like an adult movie about two kind of juvenile men.
I think we're going to have a couple audience questions if anyone has one. Okay, I see all the way in the back was the first hand that I took up. I'll repeat the question.
Okay. First, just wanted to say thank you for writing OCD into your character. I think that's really important in mainstream media, not something that's represented often. So I was pleasantly surprised.
I was going to mention it 16 times every 5 minutes.
But I wanted to ask how your experience with OCD influenced the writing of your character, but also the relationship that he has with Benji.
Oh, sure, thanks. Yeah, she's asking about my real obsessive compulsive disorder. It's autobiographical. Yeah, I can answer this line down if it would be better. Yeah. Well, okay, thank you. You can invoice me after, but basically, I just always try to write everything that I know, just because every time I try to do something else, it's just not good. So, yeah, it's just very specific. And the reason I was wanting to write about OCD is because kind of I medicate it away and it's manageable in my life. And actually, worst case scenario is that I'm doing it now, which is I touch my fingers on this side, so I'm probably gonna unconsciously touch my fingers to this side. And it's stuff that doesn't interfere with my life at all. Except at this moment, but basically, and what I was trying to portray was basically it is a problem in my life, but it's something that is in my opinion, not worth discussing ever because there's horrible tragedies every moment in the world, in the cities that I live in, but in the world at large too, and so it feels to me obnoxious to even talk about it. But it is something that actually kind of has rankled me for a long time, right? So I guess I was trying to kind of play with that, with what kind of pain is valid, and so that's what the title is, a real pain. It's is that real pain? If you can kind of, take Effexor and it's lessen a little bit, which is actually very good. Or is the Holocaust the only pain we should say, or the wars in the Middle East and the wars in Ukraine and the hurricanes in the South, or are those the only pain that we should feel sympathy for? And so yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to ask, and to write about my own issues just felt that much more specific.
I really resonate with that, thank you.
thank you so much. Thank you so much for saying that.
I saw this thing. I saw this
Hi.
right back.
Hi.
Hi, this is actually my second time seeing. I was here last night,
Oh
and
my
I
God.
just had, and I was just curious, the differences between the two characters, Benji and David, they're very interesting, and since you mentioned how this was based on your Aunt Doris, and Benji's relationship with Dory is the same as your relationship with your aunt, how was it to, write this whole thing into that perspective, and or would you say would you were more David or Benji in real life? And the song In the Shower, when you get to Poland, is there a significance in that song? I find that very curious.
Wow, thank you so much. I have to lie down for this one as well. Turning into a very comfortable Q&A. Yeah, thank you. Your questions are so generous and sweet. Yeah, asking kind of the nature of the relationship between the guys and their grandmother, and also the song In the Shower was basically just I just wanted to write a song there because I wanted to show that Benji is basically just so interested in other cultures, but in this kind of transient way, kind of sucks other cultural stuff into his orbit in a way that maybe we would consider appropriation, or he would probably describe as just great interest in, that's why when he meets the character from Rwanda, he's it's like a light bulb went off, but he's actually not going to have a sustained relationship with that guy. He just wants to suck the interesting thing out of him, and then kind of, he doesn't actually show interest in him again. And so it's that kind of thing, which I have a little bit too. My degree is in anthropology, as is my wife, so I'm fascinated meeting people who are different than me, of course. But I recognize myself sometimes a little bit of a transactional thing, where I'm just curious to know about this one specific thing about them, rather than maybe the whole person, and it's just something I notice myself and try to correct. But basically, that's why I chose that song. And in terms of the relationship, so my Aunt Doris, she died at 106, but from the time I was 17, I would visit her every Thursday. She was the most closest person in my life, and she was really tough on me, unimpressed with any of my professional accolades or whatever. I even lived with her in my 30s. I think I needed somebody like that, as Benji describes, because Benji's kind of rattling around the world, and he says she was the only one who keep me honest. Everyone else disappeared when I needed them most. And it's this kind of mean thing to say to David, but also how he really felt. This one person who was mean to him, but tough on him, meant a lot to him, which is why he says the best moment in his life is when she slapped him. Because the only time he felt happy is feeling a kind of grateful pain, when he feels the pain. And she slapped him, and it taught him that he belonged in the world. And that's how I felt too with my aunt. And then the David of it all, David is basically just the cousin who is why would I hang with my aunt all the time? That's crazy. I'm a good friend. And so that's what I was thinking about it. So, he wears a baseball cap from his Midwestern college, and basically is just somebody who is kind of more of a yuppie, and Benji was the one who was how the fuck can you do that? How the fuck can you not call her every Sunday? And it's just it was that kind of rivalry that he co-opted her from me.
Thank you.
We have time for one more. Right there.
Hi. I really love how the film starts and ends on essentially the same shot of Kieran. Can you go into depth into why you decided to end it that way rather than the slap leading to him actually coming to the house?
Yeah.
Or it kind of feel we get from their relationship early on with the voicemails that he might not be the most punctual person,
right.
And when I saw it before, I was thinking does he just kind of live at the airport the guy from the terminal? Why does he stay at the airport at the end?
So she was asking, why does he stay at the airport? Why doesn't he come back with David? What is that meaning? And first, just let me tell you, you have an amazing job waiting for you at a movie studio. Well, my friend is Ruben Fleischer. He directed Zombieland, and he just directed, we finished 5 days ago, the new NYC movie. He directs billion-dollar movies, Venom, etc. And he saw the movie, and he's do you want to make $1 billion? I was okay. And he said, have him come back at the end to the house. And I was oh, no, I don't want to make $1 billion. Because basically the movie is about how these two guys have grown apart and are learning about each other in a way that teaches them that it's okay that they're apart, that their lives have diverged, and that's okay in life. And that what was wonderful at 7 is unsustainable at 40. And Benji is this character who David learns over the course of the movie is not changeable. And so I wanted to keep him at the airport to show that this character exists in a transient, world. Transient, by that I mean that he exists in a world that's not stable. And so what is less stable than an airport? People are constantly regenerating. And so we can talk to people, you can kind of get the gist of a human being, and it doesn't have to have a sustained relationship with him. And so by the end, we're like trying to get in his head, and we can't. And the camera's pushing in, and it can't go any further, because this character is in some ways, to David, unknowable. And I wanted him to be a little bit unknowable to the audience too. But that's why I'm poor.
You're great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you,
Yes, she said it reminds her of the movie Old Joy, which was my first inspiration. Yes, watch that movie. About this movie, and then